is hereby called to order. It is 3 minutes after 8 on Monday, November the 15th. Present are Alderman Payon, myself, Alderwomen Tierney and Pendell Charles, and Katie George. Jim Cardillo has no heat in his house, so he will not be here this morning. I told him that was no excuse, but we managed to get along without him. We also have as a guest this morning, and hopefully our next member is Caroline Ewing. Caroline, good morning and welcome to the Audit Committee.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
We have City Manager Gerald and Assistant City Manager Lynn Farrow. We do not have our City Finance Director yet, but I'm confident that she will be here shortly. But let's get started. First of all, has everyone had the opportunity to review the minutes from our October meeting?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Do I hear a motion or any discussion at all about them?
I move that we approve the minutes of the October Audit Committee meeting.
Second.
All right. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye. Uh-oh, I wasn't there, so I can't vote. Sorry.
Okay.
Oops.
Well, I can second. I mean, I can make the motion.
Sorry. Yeah, thanks, Aranda.
I move that the audit committee minutes from the October meeting.
Okay, I thought we already had a motion, but at any rate, is there any?
I don't think Alderwoman Tierney can make the motion because she wasn't here. So,
is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right. Let the record reflect that, except for Alderwoman Tierney, the motion is unanimously approved. We have no public testimony or comments at this point. If there are any members of the public who would like to make a comment, now is the time to do it.
Do we have to approve the agenda, Alderman Payon?
Yeah, I think we do, actually. It's not on this agenda for whatever reason, but that's okay. Have you had the opportunity to review the agenda?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody
else make the motion.
Yeah, do I hear any motions? Is there a second? Motion is seconded by Alderwoman Pendell Charles. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'd call the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right, let the record reflect that the agenda is unanimously approved. Next, we have reports from committees. I do not expect to hear any reports from any committees. So we'll move on to new business unless somebody is up for surprising the chairman this morning. I don't see that anybody is, so we will move on to new business. Ms. George, looks like you're up.
I am.
It's risk management procedures.
Yeah.
Take it away.
Basically, what I put together for Alderman Payon and Mr. Gerald and Ms. Farrow was basically a risk assessment overview. And if I'm really clever, I might be able to pull it up. Alderman Payon, would you be able to share your screen with me? Do you know how that functionality works?
No, I have no clue how to do that.
All right, then I'll just see if I can pull it up on my own and I'll just kind of try to talk through it here.
You should be able to share your screen though, I think.
Well, I should be able to, but I have no clue how to do
I mean,
that.
Katie should be able
Yeah.
to, Ms. George should be able to share her screen.
It's the green box at the bottom, Katie.
All right, hang on one second. Oh, share, that's the button, share screen.
Oh, yeah, share content.
All right, now all I have to do is find the doc. I think we may have gone outside the edge of my expertise, but we'll see. Hold on.
Well,
Things are clicking here. That's maybe a good sign.
There you go.
Yeah, but see, it's just a blank document. All right, that's not good. Well, there's something there, right? Well, shoot. All right. Lynn, do you happen to have that document? Maybe you should be the one to share the screen.
I'm pulling it up now.
Okay, I
Okay.
think that's the way to
Give me a
go.
second. Okay.
yeah, I tried to do it. I was not successful.
So, Katie, you do need to stop sharing your screen or else
Oh,
someone
sure.
else can.
Gotcha. Should I not just be able to toggle out of that?
Here, I can do it on my end.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Jody.
All right, there we go.
No?
All right. So I'll just run through this. Everybody's perfectly capable of reading it on their own, but I'll just kind of hit the highlights. Can I get that doc back?
Here
There
we
we
go.
Basically, I started by saying, well, what is a risk assessment? And there's kind of an official definition. It's a systematic effort to identify critical processes and services, survey potential threats, evaluate vulnerabilities, and take steps to mitigate those risks. And many of us have heard the term risk management in our other work lives. And the way the difference between risk management and risk assessment is that risk assessment is comprehensive and an overarching look at a number of functions and services, whereas risk management is usually specific to a particular function or a department. So think of, risk management is the little subset of risk assessment. And what areas does risk assessment cover? Well, typically it includes operational risk, which includes IT in our case, financial risk, and compliance risk. And after I completed this document, it occurred to me that in our environment, we probably need to include reputational risk, or some might say political risk, because we do operate in a political environment, and there are issues that could be concerning. And what I used to tell my private sector clients is the reason you need to do a risk assessment is to make sure that you have controls in place so you're never on the front page of the paper in a bad way. So that's the reputational risk aspect. Number 4, where does risk assessment fit in the annual audit cycle? Well, I'm here to tell you it's the first step. It's really not appropriate or a good idea to try to do any kind of audit work if you've not done a risk assessment. Now, the possible exception to that is every year Jody takes on the task of preparing the what we used to call the CAFR, the Consolidated Audit Report, for all the financials of the city. But aside from that, we know we have to do that. That's a given. But beyond that, to look at the other areas that might require some audit inspection, that's why you do a risk assessment. You do the risk assessment based on the results of the risk assessment. You do an audit plan. And based on the audit plan, you have several audit engagements. And then in our case, quarterly, that the results of those engagements are reported to the city council. They get the results of the audit work that we've been overseeing. And why does the city of Annapolis need a risk assessment? Well, in our case, we don't have an internal audit department. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. We're a fairly small city, roughly 40,000 people, and especially in our area, cities of that size typically don't have internal audit departments, but that's not to say there's not any risk here. Another reason is we have a limited city budget for outsourced audit services because our focus is on the annual financial reporting. So if we're going to look at areas where there might be risk, we need to make sure that we're looking at the right things, not just some things. The audit committee itself has a limited budget. Alderman Payon, I believe for this coming year, it's 25,000 like we had last year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right. So that's in audit world, that's not very much money. And the other reason why we need to do a risk assessment is because we want to prevent rather than detect potential fraud, mismanagement, inefficiencies, or structural limits. So what's the saying? You want to make sure the horse doesn't get out of the barn ahead of, we're not closing the door after the horse has gotten out of the barn. There we go. By doing a risk assessment and looking where there might be control weaknesses, we can prevent those things: fraud, mismanagement, inefficiencies, and structural limits. So how is a risk assessment performed? Those in the audit business would like you to believe that it's very magical and only, certain people can do it. That's not true. It's just a methodology. And it basically has 6 steps. First, you identify the risks. And how I see us doing it is each one of us has a very different perspective on city operations and city functions and city exposures. And so ahead of our doing the risk assessment together, because this would be a joint effort, each of us would come up with 5 to 10. It just depends on the kinds of things you get animated about. But 5 or 10 risks, both citywide and by selected departments. If you think, boy, that one department I've always wondered about, fill in the blank. Well, then we all put our risk list together and hopefully submit them ahead of the day of the risk assessment. If you would submit them to me or whoever we designate, then they would compile those so that we'd have a running start on the day of the risk assessment. Basically, we're saying, what if? That's what a risk is. What if this happened? What would be the impact? And then that's when we get to Little Roman 2.
Can I interrupt for a moment?
Certainly.
Would we be likely to run a risk assessment for an entire department or particular projects within a department? Which
in our
guessing
case,
both, but
probably the second, the particular projects within a department. In a full-throated, like if we brought in an audit firm to do a risk assessment, they might do it by department, but we're not going to have the resource to do that. So I would suggest that we would look at particular projects or particular subsets of operations within a department. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So then we've got our risk list, and then we start putting them up on a grid, basically on a matrix, and we assess how likely or probable and impactful each risk is. In other words, some things you might say, yeah, absolutely, that's going to happen. But if it does, what's the big deal? Is it how impactful? That's just the word. How impactful would that occurrence be? And then in the opposite case, you might have something that's not very probable. The story I usually hear is, well, that's never happened here. Well, no, maybe not, but it could. And how impactful would that be? would that be like, as they say, a showstopper? Then that gives it a higher number. So basically what we're doing in little Roman 3, assigning numerical values of 1 to 5 to each element based on how probable it is and how impactful it is. And then after we score everything, go ahead. Alderman Pendel Charles, did you have a question?
No, and my camera keeps going out for some reason. I don't know why. No.
Okay. So then
I'm following.
So then after we've assigned scores to all of the items on our risk list, then we identify the top 10 risks with the highest scores, because obviously we want to give the most attention to the things that are most probable and or impactful. And then we assess what controls are in place to mitigate the likelihood or the impact. So we can just discuss what we know, and we'll have some department people participating with us when we do this. We would say, okay, are there controls that already take care of this? And then that might cause us to take something off of the risk list because it's well controlled, or we have a higher confidence because we know what's being done to mitigate the risk. So out of that list of 10, we kind of filter it down to maybe 3 or 4 projects to have outside audit performed to ensure controls are in fact operating, or maybe not operating, as we expect. And I would suggest that we select at least 1 from operational, financial, and compliance areas. So that would be kind of the steps that we would go through. Alderman Tierney?
Thank you, Katie. The question I have is on the categories of IT, financial, political, and operational. Is that a subcategory, or is that our primary category? In other words,
Yes, it's primary categories.
okay, so when we're identifying risks, we're under that category of financial. Then we would look at departments that handle
Correct.
money.
Correct. Absolutely.
Because I'm trying to equate it to a department that doesn't handle money. So
Right.
Right. And then that might be operational. So we have
Yes,
to
correct.
label it, basically.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay,
Mhm.
got it.
And
Thank you.
then some departments are going to have all 3. Some, in fact, finance would be an example of a department that would have all 3, or possibly 4. Any other questions on the 6 steps before we charge ahead?
No, none for me.
Okay, I don't think we talked about time frame. When I discussed this the other day, I said I feel like we could do this in an hour and a half if everybody gets their risk list to me ahead of time. I think we could knock through this. I would be happy to facilitate it, and I've done a few of these. And I think we could get something we could be comfortable with in an hour and a half together. The one thing it probably does require is for us to meet in person as opposed to virtually. But if everybody feels like we still need to stay virtual, we could figure out a way to make that happen. I just need to update my tech skills a bit, maybe, to make that happen. So anyway, then I guess in conclusion, what are the advantages of risk assessment being performed by the audit committee? Well, first of all, it's transparency. When we are live streamed, anybody in the city of Annapolis, or I guess anywhere on YouTube, can see what we're up to. And I think the citizens of Annapolis deserve to know how we operate, what we do. I think a lot of people have no idea what the audit committee does. And I think this is an important task ahead of us for this year. And I think it's a good way to show that we're serious when we say we want the activities of city government to be transparent. Secondly, we'll have input from you as committee council members. Some city administration members will be participating. Some departments that we've deemed high impact city departments. And of course, people like me and Jim are citizen members of the audit committee. So hopefully you'll have a little, it's not just one group. It's not just the city council doing it. It's not just city administration doing it. It's a cross section of stakeholders who are putting this document together. And it can be performed with no impact on city funds. In other words, we're not having to go out to like a forest consulting, although I'm sure they would do a fine job. They would not do it for free. And this way we can get what we need that will be good enough. And we will have something that we can demonstrate that we've done a systematic assessment of where the risk is that is driving the audit dollars that we do spend. So that's what I have to share about that this morning. So any other questions about proceeding? Or I think one thing we did talk about was when would we do it? And I think the discussion was January. Is that right, Alderman Paone?
Yes. The sooner the better.
The sooner the better.
Because you will have a new chair at that point. So I suppose it's not really my decision to make, but that would be the game plan at this point.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Gerald, I think you agreed as well that January would be a good point, right?
Yeah, so the committee is going to look a little bit different in December. So I think if we have a December meeting, it would be worthwhile to kind of review this again, but also to start talking about some candidates to look at.
Yeah.
The ones that we talked about during the meeting the other day were Public Works, but Public Works is big. I was thinking, as you talked about the programs and the projects, that we may just want to look at the CIP process, from the beginning to the end. That definitely has all three facets, all three risk areas to it. We also talked about planning and zoning. Again, if we drill down on that a little bit, maybe the permitting process, again, they handle money. There's operational risks associated with that, also compliance. And then we talked about finance a little bit. We didn't get feedback from Jody if there's areas that she would want to have looked at in her department. So maybe she can share her thoughts about doing some area of finance as well.
Those are the three I recall. Now, how does doing this relate to our doing what we have done with Rec and Parks and what's the other department that we did? Well, I guess maybe we haven't done any other
Yeah,
department.
we just did. We've only done Parks and Recs. Yeah.
Will we still be hiring somebody to do a departmental type of audit as opposed to a risk assessment? I guess they are separate and distinct, but tell me about
the risk assessment,
the relationship between the two, if any.
Right. The risk assessment will yield to us the areas where we will have those specific audits. In other words, instead of us just randomly discussing and saying, I know we could do a audit of Parks and Recs, the risk assessment will decide for us which audits we will do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I seem to recall having a discussion along those lines earlier, now that you mention it. Okay. How many or how often would you anticipate our doing a risk assessment during the course of the year?
In audit land, risk assessments are done annually and usually at the beginning of the fiscal year, so that you have a guide for what you're going to do across the coming year.
Okay.
Now, and sometimes we don't have a big enough budget to really make this happen, But ideally, when you do a risk assessment, you leave a little, you've allocated, let's say your budget were $100,000. You've allocated maybe 4 $20,000 audits. And you have a little cushion of 20,000, because sometimes what happens is in the course of the year, something comes up and you think, oh my gosh, this is, red hot, and we need to take a look at this ASAP. So you like to leave a little reserve, but in our case, we're going to have to kind of go with what we have. And so that's why I said only 3 or 4 projects, that they're going to have to be very scaled down, because I don't know what we spent on the Parks and Recs audit, but things are costly these days. So
well, I do think that there may be a little bit of money left over in the reserve fund if we thought we found something, or if we thought that it was really imperative to
right. Okay.
conduct an
Well,
audit. And I don't know that for a fact. I don't think the mayor would be happy with me making that particular statement, but I do think the reality is, and Dave would know more about that than I do, but I think that it's possible that we could have a little bit of money to play with, but we can't really count on that right now.
right. And I guess I would reiterate, $25,000 is not going to go very far. So
Yeah.
I know I said 3 to 4 projects. It's probably going to be closer to 2 to 3 to do anything meaningful in terms of audit. So we'll just have to keep that in mind.
All right. Who would be conducting a risk assessment? Would our committee be doing that?
Yeah, that's us. We're doing it. We're doing it.
So I'm going to miss the opportunity to put my colleagues to work, is what you're telling me.
Well, unless, of course, you were a committee. I mean, you were appointed to the committee as a citizen.
God forbid.
Can I ask, this is out of the box. We committed in our budget $50,000 to do a study to evaluate department. I'm not even really sure whether, I don't know how it's framed, but whether we're more efficient city council versus just city on certain departments because of the public asking the question every year or whatever. That's a lot of money. There's no possibility that we can reframe that at all, or use any of that money, or you can see how I feel about that study. I guess that's a question for David.
Alderman Tierney, let me ask, I think I know what you're talking about. Wasn't that the one that said what the citizen input, something about citizen input about which services they felt were most important or something?
Right, yeah, I think there were 2 of them. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's one to do a sort of a customer service or a citizen
Right,
survey to see what services are most important and how they feel like those services are being delivered. And then there's also a task force to look at city services to see, if there's opportunities to transfer some over to the county. So that would be a joint county city task force, similar to the Public Works Maintenance Facility Task Force, to get input.
Okay, yeah, I got to mix up. 50,000 is the one for the survey. Okay. Public survey. Okay. But I guess that's cast in stone. That allocation, the 50,000.
Yeah, those were part of the budget. So right now we need to move forward. Go ahead, Jody. Sorry.
I was just going to say it would take council action to target the money to some other purpose, because it was worded very carefully as to what it was for.
Well,
I'm sure Mike may be able to add more.
we reallocate funds all the time. I mean, it's kind of what we do.
Yeah.
So I don't think that presents a huge problem.
Yeah,
Uh,
I know
but it
Alderman
doesn't
Payon
take-
and I were the only ones really against it, so I don't know if we'd have much success revisiting it. But I don't know. I don't know. It's a lot of money for a citizen survey when I feel like it's our job as alderpersons to figure out what their priorities are. But I only brought it up because I thought we could redefine it somehow and use some of that money, but.
Well, and I would offer that perhaps as we complete the risk assessment, if we find that we've got maybe 5 things that really need some looking, and they're not going to be, it's going to require more than just kind of a superficial sample and test situation, that then we will have some documentation to say, based on that, $25,000 for outside audits this year just isn't enough. And that might help make a case for redeploying some of those survey funds. But we'll see. I mean, right now we don't know.
Well, it is what it is. Ellie and I fought the good fight on that issue, and we did not prevail. I think the best thing that we can do is try to do it the least expensive way that we possibly can, and hope that what we have set aside for it covers it. Believe me, if there's a way to spend money, we'll do it on this type of thing. So I don't know what else can be said about that. With regard to risk assessment, I don't really think that at this point at least directly affects any action that we take or plan on taking. I mean, it's nice to know what's popular and what's not popular, but that's never really dictated what most of us feel needs to be done. It's an element of it, of course, but I mean, doing the risk assessments on various projects or departments is something I think the committee itself can do, and it's at very little cost to the city. Yes, no?
I mean, there's no cost. I work
Yeah.
for.
Alderwoman Pendle Charles has a question.
Okay, sorry, I don't have let me get the full board up if I can. And I can't in this particular mode, but Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm willing, Alderwoman Tierney and Mr. Chair to look at reallocating that funding, to look at its use for risk assessment. I think especially after hearing Ms. George this morning.
Okay. Can you do that, please?
Well, that's like Ms. Dickinson said, that's something that we'd have to discuss with our colleagues.
Yeah, I think the council, it's got to have council approval, no doubt about it. And it may be, as a matter of fact, I suspect it'll be much easier said than done. But you're a good arm twister. You can handle it.
I guess I would just recommend that we're kind of putting the cart before the horse here. We should probably do the risk assessment, at least the high level, to determine what areas need to have a risk assessment. And then based on that effort, then we'll figure out if additional funding's needed. If that, Katie, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the way to go, which then says absolutely we need to get it done in January.
All right. Just a minute here. Okay, are there any other questions about this? Any other comments?
Jody.
Ms. Dickinson has a question.
Okay. Go ahead, Jody. Ms. Dickinson, excuse me.
Yeah, I wanted to add that when you got down to the part where you were meeting and going through your steps,
Uh-huh.
you're probably, when you're trying to decide, you have here's your list of things you're worried about. When you're trying to decide what controls are wrapped around it to mitigate, that'll help you whittle your list, but that would probably require department people to come in and talk about how those risks might be mitigated.
Right.
In place. So it wouldn't be like you were talking about an hour and a half and stuff, and I was thinking it might get a little more complicated with, addressing different things.
What we had planned, Jody, and you would not have known this because you weren't there, when we talked about this the other day, we said that the departments that would be kind of the high impact departments, we would have a representative from that department at the risk assessment participating, so that we could say to them, if we found 5 things that impacted finance, say, you or your designee could say, oh, but here's what we do about that, and here's how we've checked it, and here's why we have high confidence. So you would be able to speak about it at that time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. There also may be, from the department head's perspective, things that they're not aware of the details. So if you're trying to get at what's the risk that something could happen in planning and zoning, and you had the director come in, some of the staff would be more familiar with how they're processing permits,
Right.
something like
Well,
that. So
we
they may
talked
have to
about
go
that.
back to the staff to talk about it.
Right. We did talk about it might be better to not have the department director, but rather a staff member who would have a better view to the areas that we'd be talking about.
Okay.
But we'll as we get closer, we can fine tune that.
All right. We have as a guest this morning, Caroline Ewing, who is a potential member. But for the fact that I kind of blew it at our last meeting, we did not vote on recommending her to the council as a whole. And it's the responsibility of the 3 alder people to nominate new members to the council. Caroline, do you have any experience with running risk assessment projects in what you do? I mean, does Key School do this, or have you ever done this for anyone else during your career?
I'm sorry to say that I have not, although I'm very interested in participating in this because it is very important. It's something that I feel as though in my current position, our school has not addressed, and we need to. And so I'm very eager to go through this process, but I'd have to say I have not done it myself.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Well, let's, if there's no further discussion of this, let's move back to the agenda. Our agenda, and keep going. Thank you, Caroline, for answering that question. There we go. Now I see everybody. The audit committee transition. I have been given no instructions or no indication as to who the next chairman will be. I have some thoughts and ideas. I know who logically perhaps it would be, but I do not have any insight. The mayor has not given me any insight as to, I don't know who that was or what that was, but maybe somebody knows. Maybe it's not been decided. I don't know, but we'll find out.
Alderman Payone, I have a question. I thought I heard or knew that the audit committee itself elects their chair. Is that not correct?
No, that is not. I don't believe that is correct, but I'll check on that.
Mr. Lyles might know.
What's your question again, ma'am? I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right. I was under the impression that the audit committee itself elects their chair.
Yes, that's true. According to the code.
Okay, thank you.
But just to clarify, the mayor selects the nominees from the council to be on the committee, and those selections are confirmed by the council, the full council.
But then once the committee is, all the appointees are named, then the committee as a whole nominates and elects their chair. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And it has to be, at this point, it has to be one of the aldermanic representatives. Is that your understanding, Mr. Lyles?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Okay.
So the
All right.
chair, just to clarify, because that was different than I had heard, the chair has to be one of the aldermanic appointees.
Yes, because
Go ahead.
the committee is a council committee. And according to the code, you're allowing citizens to be on the
I see.
council, city
Gotcha.
council committee.
Gotcha.
But the council is still running their own committee,
Gotcha.
basically, with help from volunteers.
I mean, by council action, I suppose we could change that. But for example, the Financial Advisory Commission is somewhat in the same position we're in, and they have a civilian chair, but that was by council legislation. And I suspect that we could do the same thing. And I wouldn't.
Well, but you must be careful. They're a commission. They're not a sitting or standing council committee. Technically, a council committee under the code, all the other council committees, just council members. This is the only one that includes volunteers. You're able to do that, but you're straddling the line between a council committee and, say, a volunteer commission or board. But because you are a standing council committee, it's likely best to stay in line with all the other council committees and have the council members be the chair and run the committee, potentially with the volunteers assisting you.
And
Well,
the
whatever
fact doesn't have any,
Does FACT have a council person? I don't think
They do
FACT
not.
has a council person.
they don't have any council members.
I might be wrong, but I think what this did is typically an alderperson has 3 committees to attend to. And as for some reason, I don't know if the math works out that this gives someone a 4th, but I might be wrong.
No, it works out. The numbers work out, Alderwoman Tierney.
Okay, I
3
think I'm
for
just
each.
being
It's 3
subjective.
for each, even with this.
Right.
Okay, I have 4. I think I'm being subjective because I have 4 right now, adding audit, but maybe Dwan
Somebody else
doesn't.
must have only 2 then.
That might be Dwan then.
That's because we all knew what a glutton for punishment you were, Alderwoman.
No, because I'm your buddy.
Normally, I have that legislation right in front of me during committee meetings. Of course, this is the one time that I did not run into the office over the weekend and get my audit committee folder and bring it home with me. Apologies for that. But I think at any rate, if we're going to make significant changes as to the format or as to the chairperson, that will have to do it by way of council action. They'll have to change the law. It's that simple, and whether they have the authority to do that, I think, is an issue to be raised at the time the legislation is considered, not really today. I would suggest you wait till the next meeting to do that, to elect the chairman. I think you'll be in a better position to do it at that time, whether it's December or January that we meet, or that you meet, excuse me. I think the terms of the civilian committee members are not affected by the end of the administration. You each were given 1, 2, and 3-year terms respectively, and that is not affected by whatever we do. I think I would suggest that if we do change any part of the legislation, that maybe we make everybody every term a 3-year term. We staggered the terms initially, I think, as much as anything to get off the ground, so we would not be losing civilian members all at one time. That's the obvious reason. But now that I think we're up and running to a much greater degree than we were when I started with this thing. I think we can just give everybody a 3-year term, aside from the fact your chairman gets mixed up as to who has what term. I think I would suggest to my colleagues on the council that we just make everything a 3-year term. And I think that has to be done legislatively, because I think it's in the original legislation that there be 1, 2, and 3-year terms. So yes.
Alderman Pale, that's the way it's written. And then thereafter it becomes 3-year. So the initial appointments are 1, 2, 3, 4 years, but then thereafter it's 3 years. That's the way it's written in the code. So you had already incorporated your thought in the legislation.
I'm just brilliant, aren't I? What can I say? Everybody's smiling except my colleagues. They know better.
We can fix it.
Okay. Is there anything else that we need to talk about regarding the transition? As has been frequently been the case, I'm regretting that we're not in the position we're in sooner in my term. But keep in mind, I think that I was named, and I think the mayor appointed me as chairman. And that's why I have in my mind that the mayor does appoint the chairman. He did appoint me, as I recall. And it was because he didn't want me on the finance committee with Ross at the time. And well, little did he know that there were ways around that. But my audit background is 0, zip, nil, nothing. And I think putting me as chairman was probably, I certainly was not the most qualified person. And I think that at the time, none of the alder people on that were the original 3 had any type of an audit background. So it's been a learning process. And originally, although not the case right now, but originally we moved at a glacial pace. And I regret that, but it's what happens when you appoint somebody chairman of a committee that doesn't have any sort of a background in the field that the committee covers. And that's what we had. I don't feel that way now, and I think we're really moving right along as far as I'm concerned. I think we have. I've got the committee in a position to make great strides, and I fully expect the committee to do that in the very near future. Thank you, everyone, for your assistance, and it hasn't been easy, believe me, chairing a committee like this. You know, you go on public safety, and well, it's not that hard to learn about the workings of the police department, the fire department. You go on the finance committee, and while that is comprehensive and not an easy committee to be on by any means, you pretty much have, almost anyone has the tools, the general tools to make a contribution right off the bat. I didn't have that advantage way back when the committee was formed. And while I apologize for the pace at which we moved initially, I don't think, I'm not sure what else could have been expected, given who the chairman's background and the background of the other audit committee members. Now the civilians were fine. It was a great committee in terms of the civilians that were appointed. It was terrific. I think we had a large degree of frustration. I regret that, but hey, we're in a good place now, and let's do it. The next item of business is unfinished business. I will go a little bit out of line, and I know that Caroline Ewing has to leave us in just a little bit. The meeting may be over actually by the time she has to leave us, but let's take this first. And I don't mind doing that in her presence. Normally, I don't like to do things that way, but this is to the three alder persons, myself and Alderwoman Pendell Charles and Alderwoman Tierney. I think we have a candidate here that ought to be brought to the attention of the council. I have to depend on one or both of you to bring it to the council's attention. I'm not going to be a member of the council at our next meeting. However, I think that Ms. Ewing is thoroughly qualified and is in a position to make a real contribution to our efforts. Her enthusiasm is shown by her presence at this meeting. Not that if she weren't here, it would mean she's not enthusiastic, but we haven't had attendance and participation by potential members very often in the past. I think that she would make an excellent member of the audit committee, but the way we do it is the three of us have to vote and it has to be at a audit committee meeting to send her name to the council as a whole. I thought by now that she would be a member, my mistake, and I was not allowed to bring it to the council's attention in October because we had not discussed, we had informally discussed her being nominated, but we did not in fact formally do it. Ellie, Alderwoman Tierney, do you have any comments?
No, I think that we should entertain submitting a recommendation to, well, I don't know where Hillary is on this, but we could recommend.
Well, I think you simply, I mean, I'll tell law that we have, the law department, well, actually the head of the law department's here, that we have discussed, and I'm quite sure we'll be approving her for her nomination, and please put it on the agenda for December. I think we can, I mean, not a lot gets done typically at our December meeting after an election, but I think this is a legitimate item to be added to the agenda, and we can get her on board as soon as possible. I mean, we have 2 vacancies, so we need your help, Caroline, particularly if we're going to undertake the risk assessment evaluations, and I anticipate doing that at the earliest possible time. Alderwoman Pendell Charles, any comments?
No, but of course, we're going to have to start the process with Ms. Ewing. Glad that she's here to kind of get a sense of what we do, but we can't take any official action on her today. And the other thing is, I don't know what council members are going to be on this audit committee. So in some ways, the process is going to have to restart itself.
Yeah, okay. No, you're right. You're right. I was wondering why Mike had that look of concern on his face. And you're right. You did tell us that. And
Yeah.
so Caroline, we're not going to be able to get you officially on board until at least January. The reason being that technically it's a new council coming on when that would be voting on your nomination. And we are not allowed this morning to really do anything that would bind or tie the hands of the new council. And a new nomination would in fact do that. So be patient, but we need your help, and I'm confident that you will be voted on board at the appropriate time. Well, maybe while you're here, I know you've sent a resume, but tell us a little bit about yourself. That's something we can accomplish today.
Sure. I work at the Key School. I've been here for over 20 years. I've been the Director of Finance and Operations for the last 7 years. A lot of what we're doing sounds very similar to what you all do. We manage the school's operations, we collect the tuition, we manage the risk, we engage in the audits, we prepare the financial statements for the school. And I also, in my volunteer work on the side, I'm on the Finance Council at St. Mary's, where we oversee similar work. And I was approached by Julie Donnelly asking me, she's a former member of your committee, if I would be interested in participating because you were looking for more citizen members. And to me, that was a great opportunity to get engaged in the functioning of our local government without coming at it from a political perspective, but just being able to learn, grow, and contribute to my community. So it just seemed like a natural transition for me. So I willingly added my name and will be ready to serve when I am approved.
Alderman Payon, you were looking for a motion for me, and I didn't know if there's any kind
No.
but I didn't know if
No.
there was any kind of motion we can make to recommend to the new
No, ma'am.
council or something.
No,
No,
ma'am.
ma'am. Okay, yes, sir.
I had momentarily forgot about our
Okay,
conversation I had with City Attorney Lyles. It would be we wouldn't
Okay.
accomplish what we want to by taking a vote today.
got it.
But it's just, if nothing else, it's a reminder to Alderwoman Tierney and Alderwoman Pendel Charles that we will need your assistance at the appropriate time regarding her nomination. I'm not going to be around to formally nominate her even at the next audit committee meeting. So
Alderman Payon, as Mr. Lyles indicated earlier, the makeup of this audit committee is going to be different because you're not going to be here. So it's going to be the decision of this audit committee
right.
to make the recommendation to the full council.
Well, regardless of whether I agree with that ruling, as Dick Israel used to say, I may be an attorney, but I'm not the city attorney. So I will defer to Mr. Lyles's interpretation. I think that as long as this committee and the council are free to say yes or no, I think that covers it. But be that as it may, I agree that the cleanest thing to do is to simply, regrettably, Caroline, to wait on this and do it whatever in a manner that everybody agrees is appropriate. So that's what we'll do. Thank you for coming this morning. And if you need to leave, by all means, we're just about done with our meeting. You won't be missing much if you have to sign off. If you care to stay, by all means, stay.
I have a few more minutes, so I'll hang on, but thank you.
Her attendance will be in the
Thank you
minutes
so
as
much,
well.
Ms. Ewing.
Thank you.
Yes,
Ms.
thank you,
Ewing.
Ms. Ewing.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Do we have any topics that we would like to review at this point that would appear to be the next matter of unfinished business? I can't think of any other than to thank everybody for their
Katie.
participation and their contributions to the audit committee. Obviously, I'm not going to be your chair. This is my last meeting, and I think we made great strides. And I wish I were going to be here to chair to see what you're going to accomplish, because I think we're going to accomplish a lot, and we're poised. We're in a position to do that. And I think
Sorry.
we have somebody else attending the meeting.
Yeah. She says goodbye, Fred. No. No.
All right.
Fred, can I just say that it's been a pleasure to have you as the chair, and you have really reframed this committee to serve a purpose. I know it was trying in the beginning, and you will surely be missed.
Well, thank you. That's very kind.
And I will ditto Alderwoman Tierney.
All right. For those of you who don't know, those are my two council wives that have spoken. They sit on either side of me at the meetings, and
His book
they're the
ends.
ones who poke me in the side to say, "Don't say that," or
Yeah. See what happens?
"Yeah, that's right." Said the wrong thing one night, and that's
That was it.
the rest is history. We haven't always agreed, but we do agree on our friendship and our ability to work together, and it's been a pleasure, that's for sure. Are there any other?
And Alderman Payon, don't forget, your daughter and my son graduated from Annapolis High School together, and they know each other well. So
Yes, and they
that
are
takes us
friends.
back a way.
Yep. They don't see each other much, but they are friends when they do, and
Yeah.
that's one of the benefits of being in a small city, that we do have connections, many connections. All right, is there anything to be brought to the attention of the committee as a whole? Is there anything for the good of the order? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
I motion that we adjourn.
Oh, wait a minute. You got to do better than that at
I
council
can't,
meetings.
no, Rhonda's going to take it over. Rhonda's been practicing.
I thought you were going to split it.
Yeah, we're gonna split it.
But you got to be bold. Mr. Chair, I move.
Go for
All
it,
right.
Rhonda.
Well, weak as it was, there is a motion on the floor to adjourn. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 You let the record reflect, we unanimously agreed to